Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bricked and Mortared. In this chat, I'm going to be unpacking the real costs of Auckland's proposed 2025 development contributions. Let's start. You've planned a low-cost, affordable new build in the inner northwest of Auckland for late 2025. Low cost all the way. You understand it's all about the materials and labour. You know you need to contribute to some of the Auckland growth contributions. That figure currently is roughly $30,000. But you didn't know that you'll be wrong, and you're wrong all the way. You'll actually be paying an extra $70,000 on top of that figure. Yes, folks, you're paying extra for roads and reserves, most of which you'll not see for the next 20 years. Welcome back. I'm Kirsty Merriman, a full-time bespoke infill Auckland property developer. My comments are my opinions, and they're based solely off my analysis and a check with one or two others in my network. And it's also based off my in-depth analysis of readily accessible public information provided by the Auckland City Council. I hope that this will actually stoke your curiosity and encourage some discussion within your networks. So today I'm diving into something that affects anyone thinking about building or buying a new build home in Auckland. The development contributions, or DCs as they're more commonly known. What I've unpacked may throw you. It threw me. First up, what are these development contributions? So let's understand what they are. And of course, when somebody builds a new house, they need to help pay for all the infrastructure that that house will use. Things like roads, parks, and stormwater systems, community centres, libraries. On the surface, this seems fair, very fair. New houses should help pay for new infrastructure. Councillors reviewed their policy for 2025. The picture, as far as I'm concerned, it is not pretty at all. My guess is that in some areas, it will actually crush new home building. So let's imagine, as I've said, you've got your new build plan. It's low cost because it's all about speed. It's all about materials. And everyone's talking about insulation. So you've got the best. If you wanted to pop this onto a site in the inner northwest, council are actually wanting $100,000. That's kill project and likely will achieve negative equity for you, unless the land comes nearly free or even free. So what I'm going to do here is take you through some of the observations I've made. I chose things to look at, and I felt if I found enough things that concerned me or warranted more research, that would indicate the whole thing needs a good look at. And that's what I think I found. So what I'm going to do is explain why some areas are paying around about $100,000 in cost. So to me, it's how it's all costed up or priced up and where the costs are distributed. That's where it's really quite interesting. So let's look at a cost escalation problem, for example. So the council has published all of the information, which has been fantastic. It was very hard to find. We put our first submissions in, I think it was the 15th of November of 2024. And by the end of the following week, I received an email and were directed to some full-on models, which was good because it's really hard looking at PDF spreadsheets. So here is a real example taken from their own numbers on brownfield sites. So here it's a basic intersection upgrade, a small one. The actual work cost $180,000. So that's like the paving, the new light poles, any arboural works. I looked at the figures there and they didn't seem to be unreasonable. Some were high, some were a bit lower. So unders and overs, yeah, I'm not arguing that. But it's what happens next that's got me concerned. So they're adding 20% for on-site overheads. Now this is way above what others are using. I think the figure is about 10%. So you know, all the costs of running that site. Now, 20%, you're adding, was it 18? So 36,000. Okay, those costs might be high if the project is really extended, but this is a small intersection upgrade. That is a big cost. Then they're adding 10% for off-site costs. Now, I'm not arguing with that because that's actually not unreasonable. I think the standard can be 7 to 12%. So 10%, yeah, not a problem with that. But then we start to get into the real costs. They've got 18% for project development is consultants' costs and the council management costs. But that's not it. Doesn't stop there. They then add 16% for pre-implementation costs and council overhead management costs. Then we get into another 11% for implementation costs. Now, there will be costs there, no denying that. That'll be the checking, the health and safety. But we've added a huge amount onto that $180,000. And they're all linear. And the bigger the project, the bigger the cost. There are no economies of scale at all, it seems. But that's not the end of the story. So we've pulled all of that together. Great. And then they slam on a contingency of absolute epic proportions. What seems to be a 70% contingency. So that $180,000 project has just become nearly $600,000, triple the original cost. And yes, you're paying a share of that. So now let's look at that type of workup and apply it to a project that they've got for the inner northwest. And it's called the Brigham Creek Road. And why I'm featuring that here is because that shows the effect of a delay. If it were to be built today or yesterday, it would be 30 million to build. But council has pushed it out. And I assume they're pushing it out because they don't have enough money. You know, chicken and egg situation. So on those costs, that 30 million, they're adding 26 million in basic allowances. On top of that, they sum that up and then they're adding a compounding factor, 11 million in client costs. Now, what I've determined client costs to be is these are council costs, the cost of council managing the projects. But on top of that, they've added a 50% contingency, 34 million. So remember, we had 30 million to build today, 26 million in basic allowances, another 11 million in client costs. Add that together, add 50%, 34 million for contingency. But that's if we were to build it just tomorrow. We've forgotten the escalation costs. That's $150 million in escalation because it's not going to be built for at least 20 years, I believe. Someone can check that. So they're taking your money now, and you're going to say, but they're taking my money now. Yes, they are. Now, the council have considered that on interest costs. In positive, it'll be sub 4% interest that will be earned. But if it's in negative, then it's going to be around about 5.7% interest that you're paying. So that $30 million project is now finished up at $250 million, with 60% of that cost being just escalation. I then found that there were assumptions I wasn't comfortable with. One of them is the sealed surface calculations. And it seems to be they're assuming every new freestanding home creates just short of 300 square metres of sealed surface or impervious surface area. So that's where the rain can't soak into the ground. So things like the house coverage, driveways and roofs. But that's outdated. Today, we're encouraged to build upwards. We share driveways. And modern affordable townhouses or freestanding homes will cover roughly 70 square metres each, if they're modest. That's not 292. I want to know, are they using this 292 to estimate stormwater needs? Then the next thing I observed was the land coverage limits. The council seems to be assuming that when areas are fully developed residentially, 90% of the land is covered. So 90% becomes impervious. But to me, that's actually impossible under the unitary plan. It explicitly limits this to between 60 and 70%. So how can they charge that based on something that can't happen? The document qualifies to say that Healthy Waters did an investigation and discovered that homes there are 80%. And they're assuming that will be what continues into the future. You need to show us that because have you actually scoped the new greenfield quality stormwater system that you want to put into that area correctly? Because are these assumptions correct and relevant? Because the cost of the project is actually $800 million to be shared by those trying to build affordable homes privately in the Tamaki area. So that's Glen Innes and surrounds. Then they have another comment to say no meaningful on-site stormwater management devices happening in new developments. Well, that's not true. I don't know where they've got that from because the council themselves are the one that have written into our resource consents that we must install stormwater management devices to reduce the stormwater demand to less than pre-development levels. They're qualifying it to say there's no space. But again, it's not the same as what's actually happening. New homes are installing detention tanks and adding $10,000 to the cost of each house. Various solutions such as slimline tanks, under deck tanks, under driveway tanks, above ground tanks. That needs to be rechecked and re-put into their models. Then the other odd thing is the number of new houses assumed to be built. You would assume that house building is just going up steadily in a linear fashion. But that's not what we see in the numbers when we chart them or eyeball them. Council's expecting to collect $1.23 billion in development contributions over just 2 years in just one area, 2051 and 2052 in the inner northwest. So that means 14,000 new homes are built in just 24 months. Now let's get some perspective on that. The entire city only manages about 1,500 homes per month now. To me, those numbers seem to be engineered to meet that income need. Now, I don't know what the impact is, but I don't like seeing that. And I would say the models need to be reviewed because we shouldn't really be fiddling around with new build numbers to qualify or generate revenue. Here's another one that I'm quite passionate about because I spent a couple of years living in South Auckland and Takanini, and I love the area. It's called the Awakeri Wetlands. To me, that seems to be an example of the last man standing and also shows an odd allocation of costs. It's now a $113 million project. It was $30 million, but that was when they put it over 10 years. It just seems to go on and on and on. And when I looked it up online, references from some of the consultants and also the project descriptions, it is a project to transform flood-prone rural land into developable land. Sounds good on the surface. But let's look at what I've seen. So far, they've collected 57 million from development. And that's in around 10 or 12 years, maybe less. They still need to recover another $74 million to cover this 130 odd. But here, this is where it actually gets interesting. Council solution is they've more than doubled the contribution per housing unit or proportion of it. It used to be $24,000 per home. Now they want to charge $58,000 per home. This is for people in Papakura and Takanini, depending on where the area is. These are the affordable areas. How on earth can they justify that? Yes, they can, because all of a sudden in their new house projection timescales, they're projecting only 100 homes per year in the area. Previously, it was 300. Now it seems to be 100. Is that real? And it just plunges off a cliff. But what I'm seeing is that private developers have actually left the area because it's just not economical to build. Between Veolia, Vector, and development contributions, the land needs to be nearly free to be able to build some houses. Also, as I've said, there are fewer houses sharing the costs. No longer they're 300 or 250, there's 100. And of that, it seems to be that Kāinga Ora have a special deal. So a Lagoima that I found in the previous submission database showed they pay sub $5,000 per home. I think I've calculated on average it's about 3,300, but I'm going to use 5,000 here just to allow a bit of error. Clearly, they're not contributing anything of significance to the funds needed. So are these DCs actually supplementing a social housing tax? So let's think about this for a minute. Today's affordable housing developers are paying $58,000 per portion of hui, or new housing unit, to fund infrastructure that mainly benefits future greenfield development, while Kāinga Ora pay under $5,000 for their development contributions in 2021. All of this for a wetland that's partly about creating new development land? Is that relevant to stormwater runoff in brownfield areas? And it seems to be the last man standing seems to be paying. Not fair, not equitable, and certainly not seemingly proportionate. There's one other thing. There seems to be a bit of money that hasn't been accounted for. After 2048, the calculations suddenly stop including central government funding for major arterial roads, where NZTA are paying roughly half the cost. That adds about 180 million to the costs that home buyers have to pay now to make up for it. Is this an oversight or is it something else? So this then brings a fairness question. The Local Government Act is very clear. These charges must be fair, equitable, and proportionate. But what's happening in, let's say, Whenuapai, the inner northwest? Of the $100,000 DC charge per home, only 10% goes to local projects in the next 10 years. 35% of that spending is pushed to the last 3 years of the 30-year plan. Today's home buyers are effectively paying inflated 2054 prices for projects that might never happen. The impact of all of this, to me, is housing that's affordable just stops. You see it happening in Papakura. There are fewer homes to provide growth revenue. Papakura, last man standing is paying. It seems to be a race to the bottom. I can see some green shoots of infrastructure funding changes, but we really need to get our heads around this and stop blaming new development and saying, let's not bring people in. We need infrastructure in Auckland. You need growth to help support train systems and roads. But my question is the council really the best group to be managing these projects? To me, it seems to be cost layered on cost layered on cost and not actually market checked. 20% for on-site overheads? Is that real? 12% consultancy costs? Is that real? We need more scrutiny here. There must be a better way of doing it. So if you've watched this through and thinking about building or buying a home, new build home in Auckland, these costs will and do directly affect you. It also affects the ratepayers, because if new growth is not coming about, who's going to dig up those pipes and repair them? At the moment, it's going on to private home buyers and builders. So these decisions don't just affect today's house prices, they affect tomorrow's house prices and affordability for decades. The more people who understand this, speak up and inquire, the better chance we have of having these reviewed. So thanks for your time and patience. Catch you next time. Goodbye from Brickton Mortars.